Well, the Cleveland Cavaliers are struggling, and injuries have been a big part of that. Kevin Love, of course, at the top of that list. Larry Nance Jr., the most recent addition to that list. Former Laker out the next 2 to 4 weeks and will not play against his old team. Let's welcome in Fred McLeod, play-by-play voice for the Cavs. Fred, back in November when LeBron returned to Cleveland, there was a certain energy to that game. Cavs kept that one close, losing by just 4. With LeBron out and this game being played in L.A., how different are you expecting the atmosphere to be tonight?
You know, it's always fun, Chris, when you come to L.A., even in the prior years that they've struggled with the 4 seasons, of course, going to the lottery. There's still a buzz here. You still have the famous faces, but obviously when you 23 is not on the floor and against his old team, it loses a little bit of luster, but still we expect a heck of a ball game. Both teams can score the ball, so, we on the Cavs side of things miss seeing LeBron on the floor because he's a once-in-a-generational talent, and we know what he meant to the city of Cleveland, and, at least I'll get to say hi to him anyway.
And Fred, with that being said, how hard has it been for the young guys to hear of all the great things you witnessed the last 4 with LeBron and now saying he's not there? How hard has it been for those guys to go through this?
Not at all. I think, first of all, Dennis, I think we're in a much better place than we were in 2010 without question. A younger core, assets in place, so they know it's a learning curve. Listen, they've all grown up, watching LeBron dominate the league as much as he has, and so now they have to carve their own path, and the organization's really excited. Got an owner that knows to preach patience right now, to let this thing unfold and build it bit by bit. And as you know, look at the Denver Nuggets. They went through a 5-year drought, and now they're going to be back into the playoffs. And the Lakers themselves, every team goes through it. So the Cavs, it's our turn, so to speak, to build a new chapter and build a new future. And with guys like Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance Jr. and Jetty Osman, there's some formative pieces here. Now you just have to be you can't make mistakes on draft night, and Kobe Altman and his front office certainly know that and are fully getting ready for this upcoming draft.
Guys, I've been fortunate enough to do a couple of the Cavs second halves with Fred and Austin Carr. And Fred, it seems like this young group can find enough energy for about 24 minutes, but then come that third quarter, there's a major plunge as far as them not being able to sustain it and continue the energy they gave for the first 24 minutes. It's getting to be a frustrating situation for the team, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, Mike, not only is it youthful learning, but it's attrition. You showed that graphic. Losing 3 bigs off the top right now and your best perimeter defender. So go right down the list. Let's say Indiana, you take out Sabonis, and I'm not making excuses, but it's reality. Take out Sabonis, take out Turner, take out Thad Young, take out their best perimeter defender. Go to Boston, take out Baines, take out Horford, Marcus Morris, Marcus Smart, and things are a little bit different. You still have great players out there with Kyrie Irving and Victor Oladipo, but it's just attrition, Mike, and it's been so difficult. And recently we've missed Rodney Hood for 7 games and Tristan Thompson prior to that for 10. So Larry Drew has said he's never in his 38 years of playing or coaching in the NBA ever seen such a destruction of a roster with key injuries. And so you just got to bide your time until they get back on the floor.
Well, the season didn't start out the way the Cavs had hoped they did. So as a result, we've seen certain players moved on now. Korver's gone, George Hill's gone, JR is not with the team. But some guys have stepped up. Clarkson has increased his value, in my opinion.
Yes.
Then a guy like Thompson comes back, and if Thompson is a piece you need for your team, or Kevin Love, who has a very nice contract, 3 years left after this year on his contract, and even a guy like Hood, there's trade value there. Would you expect the Cavs to make another move before trade deadline?
In terms of actually helping this season, you think? Is that what you're asking?
Or getting who knows, you get another first-round pick down the road. Isn't that part of what it's all about?
Yeah, exactly. I think they'll survey any possible scenario to see, what's going to help not only short-term but long-term. Losing Kevin was such a difficult loss, not only a 5-time All-Star, but part of the maturation of having Colin Sexton grow is to having guys like Kevin in the very first bucket of the season. He caught a pass and set up another player for a dunk. And, Colin doesn't have that option right now, a go-to guy in the block, as you're seeing, or a guy that can flash to the corner. And so Colin's had to carry a lot of that scoring load on his own, but he's a really willing worker, a sponge. He attacks the rack, as we know, with great speed. But he's seeing things more now, and he says he's really tough on himself, but he expects to be able to continue to mature. He's leaning on Matthew Dellavedova, leaning on Larry Drew, who played the point guard position for 10 years. So I love the dog in him, so to speak, and 3D, you can speak to that. That's a compliment to a guy who's got a great motor and wants to improve. He wants to be great, and so time will tell.
Cavs-Lakers play tonight at 9:30. Fred McLeod, play-by-play voice for the Cavaliers. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, Chris. Thanks, fellas.
All right, Freddie.
Thank you, Fred.
Let's continue that conversation in particular about a guy like Kevin Love. He's been hurt for a big part of the season, so we're not hearing his name. But when you look at where Cleveland is, worst record in the NBA, you look at a guy, Kevin Love, who can clearly contribute on a team that's trying to contend. Do you imagine that he'll still be on this roster past the trade deadline as teams are looking to improve to make a playoff push?
Things happen that you can't predict. Okay, so at the time that Cleveland signed Kevin to a 4-year contract this past summer, everyone was like, wow, they made the commitment to Kevin Love. And they wanted Kevin there, and they wanted to be in the playoffs this year. But then after 4 games, Kevin is out, and then the series of injuries that we've just talked about pile up. They finally make that decision, you know what, this isn't going the way we thought it was going to go. We can get some value. So Korver's moved on. George Hill has moved on. The reasons for JR not being with the team right now, other teams are sitting out there. They want JR.
Right.
They're just waiting for the Cavs to cut him so they can pick him up rather than have to do a deal and give up a second-round pick or whatever it might be. So this team now has changed direction, and they are in the rebuild mode. Kevin is a huge piece. His contract is not that bad. 3 more years. And if you trade for him, you've got him for 3 more years after this year. So it's not like you get him, you're worried he's going to walk away on you like a Kawhi Leonard situation. So I think something else will happen before trade deadline. If it's Kevin, you know what, 5-time All-Star, he deserves to play with a good team.
And certainly the Cleveland Cavaliers looking to stock up on draft picks. It'll be interesting to see if Love is moved for one of those. Good game coming on tonight. The Nuggets and the Blazers. That is correct. Jokic getting his dance on. We're going to check in on the Joker next. You're watching Game Time Live.
Get it, big fella. Get it. Dab on him, dab on him, dab on him, dab on him.
We have a full week of games, including tonight's Spurs and Thunder rematch. Sunday night, we have a finals rematch of sorts. LeBron James' current team will face his former team. Lakers host the Cavs. LeBron's still out with that injury. Tuesday, it's a doubleheader featuring the Lakers again as a nightcap. Pay close attention to Thursday afternoon. 3 o'clock game from London between the Wizards and the Knicks. And that will conclude a busy week of games right here on NBA TV. So we've officially passed the halfway point of the regular season. There's a line of demarcation in the top 5 teams in the Eastern Conference. We seem to know who they are heading towards the postseason. Unless there's a collapse, those 5 teams will be in. So your 6 through 11 teams all hovering around 500. Taking a look at those teams you see right there. Let's start with the Miami Heat because they seem to be in most control of their destiny. Justice Winslow now running the offense, 9-4 in their last 13 games. Brendan, why is that working so well for them, having Justice run that offense?
Well, I think they really have a diversified portfolio in their game anyway. They don't really have a true point guard. They have multiple guards out there, multiple guys that can handle the ball. Justice gives them a defensive toughness, a tenacity, and he's improved his jump shot tremendously from when he first came out. So I think it works for their team, but they basically just getting their best guys out there, their athletic guys, and they're letting them all go out there and play and have an impact on the game.
Griff, when we look at the Brooklyn Nets, that seems like a miraculous accomplishment by the front office, okay, because they're competitive now. Karis LeVert emerges as one of their best players. He goes down, and they just seem to respond by winning more games, winning 13 of their last 18. Can we assume that they're going to be in the mix in the playoffs as well?
It's interesting. I think they're one of the teams that has to decide if they're a seller or a buyer. And when I look at their circumstance, I think you probably call them a team that's still trying to accumulate assets. They're going to keep trying to add picks. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Sean Marks and Trajan Langdon look at potentially moving somebody along the lines of Joe Harris, by way of example, who's on a tremendously team-friendly contract. He's shooting 48.5% from three.
They can't move our guy Joe Griff. That's
Yeah,
our guy.
Well, I understand. And the thing for me is they actually made it possible for Joe to become Joe, in large part because Kenny Atkinson has built the environment that he has there. They are a team that tells each other what they need to hear. They have very high accountability standards there. And guys play both sides of the floor with equal passion. And so Joe has gotten an opportunity to really thrive there. But I also think that if you're in the situation they're in, adding picks would be really significant for them. And while they could probably make a playoff run and a playoff push, they may not think they can do damage in the playoffs, and maybe you push things down the road one more year. It's a possibility.
Do you think that the young guys would benefit, though, from being in the playoffs and getting that experience, though?
I do think there's value in that, but I also think if you get into the first round of the playoffs and it's a mismatch when you're there, they only get so much out of that. And the long-term benefit of getting additional picks that you can build around, probably greater. Now, the counter-argument to this is, look, Joe Harris is there for next year. If they're going to try to be good next year and be a playoff team, how do you live without a guy that shoots quite like that? And I could hear that argument as well.
Well, taking a trip out west, when we look at the Utah Jazz, that's a team that we just all assumed would take a leap this season. And early in the year, they seemed to take a step back. Now they seem to be making that leap as far as Donovan Mitchell finding his stride. Last year, they got Rudy Gobert back to make their playoff push. This year, that wasn't the case. They were healthy and still struggled early on. What do you see from them now that's got them back on the winning track?
Well, ironically, I think one of the things that happened is they've had so many injuries to their point guards, they've needed Donovan Mitchell to be more ball dominant, and they've needed him to value possessions more. I think Donovan was really struggling early on with the quality of shots he was taking. His decision-making was lacking a little bit, and I think what you've seen in the absence of the other available playmakers, he's sort of taken the onus to be a little bit more mindful of quality of shot, getting other people involved. And certainly the number one issue is they've committed themselves to the defensive side of the floor at the same rate they did last year. They were all about overachieving at one point last year, and they came into this season maybe thinking they were better than they were. They're a young team. They're not used to taking people's best shots. But the schedule gets a lot easier from here on out from them, and you should see them be able to make some strides.
Yeah, and another thing is that Rudy Gobert has played very strong for them as well. He's continued to be beastly on the boards. He has been big inside. He has been eating the glass, 13 rebounds per game on the season. And when you have a big man in that like that that's giving you those extra possessions, he's able to block shots at the rim. He's able to control the paint on both ends, and that has a value for a team like Utah that's, they're not the most talented up and down team in the world. So a guy that can, when you slow it down, a guy that can have an impact defensively and then give you extra possessions on the other end, he's key for you. Also, he closes out possessions with great defensive rebounding.
I also think one of the things that happened to them early in the year is the new defensive rules took a big impact on them. It had a big impact on them and took a little while for them to figure out how to adjust to it, because both Joe Ingles and Jay Crowder can be very good defensively, but they were doing it with a little bit of physicality at one point. So they had to adjust to that. And when you also don't have ball-dominant play creators like a lot of the better teams in the Western Conference, if that's going to be something that's at a premium because the officials are letting you drive now with almost impunity, not having another driver is a big issue as well.
Well, certainly the Houston Rockets have a guy driving that team, and James Harden and what he's accomplishing as you see the Rockets just skyrocketing up the standings. But then we also look at the Sacramento Kings, right? They started off red hot, 3-6 in their last 9. That backcourt dynamic at times with De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield. But do you think they're still a season away from being a team you can see in the postseason and able to try to contend to at least win a round?
Certainly win around, I think that's true. I think it's interesting the two teams you just mentioned, Houston and Sacramento, one after the other, because you've got teams that are trying to play the complete opposite style of ball. Sacramento wants to force tempo as often as they can, and what happens in a circumstance like that, particularly with a young team, is you will be a very high turnover team. You will be somewhat mistake prone. De'Aaron Fox has been special good to this point. I think as he continues to grow and evolve, the expectation that team should have of itself will grow as well, because he is a guy who can take them a very long way. But again, they may have been a year ahead of themselves.
Yeah, I think this team is a year away. I think this backcourt is very good. They do have the outside chance to maybe sneak into the playoffs and maybe grab that 8th seed or the 7th seed. But a young backcourt like this is still going to take some time. There's still going to be some things that they're going to need to learn, some bumps in the road that they're going to go through. And I think they're going to be better for it. But in the short term, they're probably not going to make the playoffs. I definitely don't see them winning around, because if you're the 8th seed or the 7th seed, there's a strong chance you run into a team like Denver or Golden State. That probably wouldn't be good for Sacramento at this time. But Sacramento fans, they say it's all purple talk out there, whatever. Listen, the future is very bright. This backcourt is dynamic. And in a couple of years, when we see other backcourts slow down, we might be saying this is the backcourt of the future. They definitely have next.
So looking at the bottom half of the Western Conference, trying to make that playoff push, of the teams you see there, who do you think will end up eventually into the postseason, and who do you think will be home thinking, we were close but no cigar?
Well, two of the teams that are outside the playoffs and just outside the playoffs right now that stand out to me, Utah, despite all the injuries that they have.
Absolutely.
Because they have the easiest schedule against the rest of the way in the entire league, which is hard to do in the Western Conference. Their opponents have a 48% winning percentage the rest of the way. That's a much easier road to hoe than some of the teams that are above them. And then I look at New Orleans. And both of these teams have the best scoring differential of the teams that are just on the outside of the playoffs. And I think those are teams that are very likely to make a run. And depending on what happens with the Lakers and LeBron James, the length of his injury and his absence will have a great deal to say about who makes the playoffs and who doesn't.
Right.
Certainly something we're going to have to keep an eye out on the West Coast, trying to figure out, okay, what team still has the goods, what team does not. And when you look at Sacramento coming into this season, they've already overachieved, right? They've already gone to a place we didn't know that they would be. When you look at their roster overall and you look at the backcourt, you think that's solidified, and they have a young player in Marvin Bagley and another guy they're developing in Harry Giles. What do you think their biggest need is as far as what they're going to try to do in the offseason in position they can grow fastest and most?
Well, I think one of the things you've seen when they've talked about potential trades for Sacramento, and they've been linked to Enes Kanter by way of example, I think they're looking for a big who can score in the paint. I think they're looking for somebody that they can believe in at the 5 a little bit more offensively than Willie Cauley-Stein. At the same time, I'm not exactly sure that's the direction I would go if I was them, because the defensive component is so important, the rim protection component is so important. Enes Kanter is not a defensive player in any way. And a team that wants to play that fast, giving up that many possessions, playing with 5s that aren't going to protect the rim would scare me quite a bit. So I understand that they want some interior presence, but I think they may be better off just letting it grow together with the young kids.
Right.